Okay, so welcome everyone. This is our ORCID US community call. We're going to be talking about a relatively new functionality that's available called Researcher Connect, and we'll get into all of the details with that in just a minute. But first, just to get us started, welcome. Thanks for joining us. As always, please use the chat to ask any questions or put comments there. You'll be muted for the presentation portion of this call, but at the end we'll have time for discussion and questions. Feel free to turn on the live Zoom transcript, and the recording and slides will be available after the session. So this is our April 2026 ORCID US community call. We're going to be talking about Researcher Connect. For anyone who may be new, or maybe this is your first time coming to one of these calls, my name is Sheila Rabin. I'm the lead strategist for research infrastructure programs at Lyrasis. Also, my colleague Paolo Guhilde is our senior strategist for the ORCID US community, and then Kayla Ramhit is our ORCID US community specialist. So all three of us are here, and you will be hearing from all three of us today about Researcher Connect. So let's get right into it. A little bit of background about Researcher Connect. Basically, as many of you know, when it comes to ORCID, most researchers want their ORCID ID to work for them, essentially. They want their affiliations and their works and the activities that they're involved in to just kind of automatically be added to their ORCID record so that they don't have to spend time manually updating it, essentially. However, there is kind of an issue there where researchers don't always know the resources that are available to help them update their ORCID record and the kinds of tips and tricks that are available, and also which of the organizations that they're affiliated with have ORCID integrations. At the same time, ORCID member organizations want to also have ORCID work for them. They want to stay up to date with what their researchers are doing. But also at the same time, once you've integrated the ORCID API into your local systems at your organization, it can really be a lot of work to get the word out to all of your researchers that this ORCID integration now exists and that they need to go and connect their ORCID ID with it. So that's kind of the context in which we are starting here, thinking about Researcher Connect. How can basically ORCID make it easier for member organizations and researchers to connect with each other through these ORCID API integrations? So just a quick review, there are basically three ways that information can be added to an individual's ORCID record. The first way is the individual researcher logging in to the ORCID website and manually adding their own information to their ORCID record there. The second way is through the ORCID member API. So at your organization, we're all ORCID members, member organizations, we can basically turn on the ORCID member API functionality in vendor systems like Symplectic Elements, for example, or Pure or OJS. But also member organizations can develop custom ORCID integrations and use the member API to essentially push information into your researcher's ORCID records. So that's the second way. And then the third way is through the ORCID Affiliation Manager tool, which doesn't require your organization having a ORCID member API integration with any of your existing systems. The Affiliation Manager is basically a tool that's made available by ORCID so that you can kind of write data to your researchers' ORCID records without having your own systems integrated with ORCID. So that's just kind of a review on the different ways that information can be added to ORCID records. And really adding information to your researchers' ORCID records is one of the best things that organizations can do to help their researchers basically make sure their ORCID records are up to date and populated with all the information that they need so that when they go to apply for a grant or go to work with other organizations, that information is already in their ORCID record and it's verified there. So, having affiliations, especially like employment affiliations, that is especially crucial for helping researchers show that indeed they are employed at your organization or they did go to school and get their education from your organization, for example. Um, so, having these affiliations added by organizations really helps with that trustworthiness in the research ecosystem and the integrity of the information that's in ORCID. So, what you're seeing here is an example of an employment affiliation that somebody added to their own ORCID record themselves manually. And you can see that with the source being the name of the individual who added that information to their own ORCID record. And then the second example here is it's just an example showing what it looks like when an organization adds that employment affiliation to the person's ORCID record through the API, for example. And the same green check mark would be there if you use the affiliation manager to add that information. So while it is great to have individuals add their own information manually to their own ORCID records, it's actually even better to have that green check mark, basically verifying that the organization is saying, yes, this person is employed at this organization. And the green check mark is what we at ORCID are referring to as trust markers that help other organizations and other parties in the ecosystem see that, yes, this is trustworthy information here. So ORCID essentially developed Researcher Connect to help make it as easy as possible for researchers to get these verified, validated trust markers in their ORCID record when it comes to affiliations. You may already have ORCID API integrations at your organization, or you may have already been using the affiliation manager to push affiliations into your researchers' ORCID records. But Researcher Connect is now available to specifically get those researchers at your organization that have not made that connection to your organization through ORCID, get them to actually take that step, make them aware that that connection is available for them. And essentially, the whole goal and purpose behind all of this is to just get more validated, trustworthy information populated into researchers' ORCID records. So that's kind of the background and reasoning behind Researcher Connect. Kayla's going to take us through how it actually works. And so this will shed more light on the process for how it works to use Researcher Connect. So go ahead, Kayla.
Thank you, Sheila. So let me share my screen. You're able to see?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So like Sheila said, I'm going to take us through how Researcher Connect actually works. So Researcher Connect has 4 steps. So that first step is really the identification piece. So Sheila mentioned those verified trust markers in the ORCID record. So ORCID uses your organization's institutional email domains to find unconnected researchers with that verified domain on their record. So that verified email domain. So an email domain is essentially the everything after the at symbol. So for example, at unc.edu or at mail.unc.edu or something along those lines. So after identifying researchers with those verified email domains, Researcher Connect in step 2 will send the notification to those researchers. And that notification invites the researcher to connect with your organization's integration that is pushing affiliations. In step 3, researchers having gotten that notification are then directed to your organization's ORCID landing page. So that would be where they will sign in and authorize that connection to connect their ORCID ID with that integration and receive those affiliations in their ORCID record. And then the final step is if they decide not to connect or they miss the notification, a reminder is sent 30 days later. So I mentioned that email, verified email domain. So those identify the researchers that haven't connected to your integration yet. So a researcher will only receive a notification if they have that relevant email domain. So in my example here, you see in the email domain section that lyricist.org is a verified email domain. If they haven't linked to your integration yet, they will receive that notification. And then if they have not received a Researcher Connect notification from your integration within the last year. So Researcher Connect will only send notifications at most twice a year. So that first notification followed by that reminder notification 30 days later if the researcher didn't connect at that first time. So just as kind of an example, if let's say you decided to get Research Connect and activated it on May 1st. The researcher got that notification on May 1st. Then they decided not to connect or they didn't see it. 30 days later on June 1st, they get that reminder, and then for whatever reason they didn't connect again. They wouldn't receive another notification until the following year, May 1st, 2027. So ORCID sends researchers that notification inviting them to connect. So the researcher connect notification will have the directing the researcher to the organization's ORCID landing page. You'll see in this example that little button at the end, which will link them directly to that landing page. It will also contain the organization's name and then a note in the notification about anyone who is not eligible for the notification. So what that really means is if, say, researcher has left the organization, is no longer a staff, faculty, or a student at your organization, they may still receive the notification because they still have that verified email domain in their ORCID record. So this notification will just mention, hey, you may not be affiliated with, in this example, University of Oxford. So you can either disregard this notification or you can remove the relevant email address from your ORCID record, and then you wouldn't receive any more of those notifications. And then this notification will appear in the ORCID inbox, and I just have an image there of where that is, that little bell icon right next to your name. So ORCID will also send an email notification as well. So that directs researchers to their ORCID inbox where they will see that notification information I shared on the previous slide. And those email notifications are triggered based on the email frequency settings in your ORCID record. So if you go to your name and then it is settings under that dropdown, you'll see an option for email frequency, and there's an image there of what it can do. You can change it to weekly, annually, or not at all. So ORCID will also in the future prompt users with these notifications. So this is a future thing ORCID is working on. It's not available yet, but there will be an organizations want to connect panel above the information in an ORCID record. And that'll be another way that researchers will be able to see these notifications to connect to integrations with your organization. So it's not ready quite yet, but it's something that ORCID is working on. So one of the important pieces for Researcher Connect is that landing page that an organization has with their integration. So one of the things that Researcher Connect does is it links researchers to that organization's landing page. And so Orca just wants it to have very clear guidance. So four of those things that a landing page should have is that it should explicitly state who can connect. So if that's faculty, staff, students, or all three. It should include instructions for how a researcher can connect and add affiliations to the ORCID records. So if there's any steps the researcher needs to take, it should clearly outline those steps. It should also feature a prominent link or button to connect to the integration, just an easy way for researchers to see, oh, I just need to click to go here. And then it should also explain why the organization is using ORCID and how a researcher can benefit from making that connection. So there's an example there showing the explanation, the prominent button, and then the instructions on how to connect. So I have a few examples of landing pages, so I'm just going to go through all of those. We have the University of Oxford. This landing page provides clear instructions on how to register for an ORCID ID, and then it also includes instructions for connecting with the organization's integration. Next, we have the Imperial College of London. So this landing page has a large prominent button that directs researchers to how to connect. It also has an explicit statement on who exactly can connect to this integration. So in this case, this integration is only for staff. So it very clearly outlines, hey, if you're faculty or a student, you're not going to be able to connect here, only staff. And also has an explanation on the benefits of having an ORCID ID for researchers. Then we have the University of Vienna. So this landing page provides clear instructions for how to connect to the integration, an explanation for users on how the organization is using ORCID, and it also has on the side here a contact information for if someone has questions or needs assistance, they know who to go to get some assistance. Then we also have the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. So they are the first ORCID US community member to activate Researcher Connect, and we worked with them about a month ago to get this all set up, and we were happy that they allowed us to share their landing page as an example. But so their landing page includes clear instructions for how to connect to the integration, an explanation for the users on the benefits of ORCID and how their organization is using ORCID. And then it also has that large prominent button directing researchers on where to go to connect. So once a researcher follows those instructions to connect, their record can then be updated with that affiliation information. So affiliations that can be written to ORCID records include employment, education, qualifications, invited positions, service, distinctions, membership, and then the newest one, which is editorial service. So here's an example here of Binghamton University has written employment to this associate professor's record. Now, I mentioned that reminder email. So what happens if a researcher doesn't connect? They get reminded 30 days later after that first notification goes out, and this cycle repeats annually until the researcher connects or removes that email domain from their record. And if, let's say, the researcher is no longer a staff or student at your organization, but they want to keep that verified email domain, they can. They are allowed to. They'll just keep receiving those notifications, and they can just choose to ignore those at that point. But they don't have to connect to the integration. So that is it from me, and I will pass things on to Paolo, and he's going to talk about the impact of Researcher Connect and those next steps.
Thank you, Kayla. So let me see if I can go ahead and share my screen. Let's go here. All right, hopefully you're able to see that right now.
Yes.
Perfect. Great, thank you. So, so now let's talk about the impact so far of Researcher Connect and the potential next steps that you're going to take. Then that includes the requirements on how to enable or activate Researcher Connect for your organization. All right, so last year, ORCID did a pilot for Researcher Connect, and I believe there were about 17 member organizations that were part of that pilot. And with that, they've seen an increase of affiliation that were connected with with the organization. So over 5,700 users were connected and added affiliations to their ORCID record. So that's a really good uptake there, and you can kind of see that on the graph here. And this one is actually from this one is specifically for Oxford University. So University of Oxford, and you'll see the uptick of affiliations that's connected because of Researcher Connect. And once you activated it, so let's say you go ahead and activate your own Researcher Connect for your organization. This past, I believe, probably in the last 10 days, ORCID actually released a way for you to take a look at the activities or metrics that involve your Researcher Connect. So if you go to your member portal, if you have Researcher Connect activated, this will be part of the reports that you are gonna get in your member report in the member portal. So with that, go to the member portal and click on member report. In the member report, you will see a monthly notifications that were sent out. So basically over time, affiliations that were sent out, so you'll see them how many affiliations those are, or the number of affiliations or notifications. And then you will also see the conversion of those notifications. So that's a really good way to kind of see the number of ORCID IDs or notifications that were associated with your Researcher Connect and how that's been converted throughout. So you will see one thing that's basically, you'll see like how many people connected their ORCID IDs and how many people actually got the affiliation in their added to their ORCID record. So that's what you'll see in the bottom portion of things, sort of like the different things of the conversion of the notification conversion. And you will also see under validated affiliations, again, this is under the member report, is that you will see just kind of looking at how many people are affiliated with your organization and throughout how many were converted to having a validated affiliation. So essentially, what you're seeing here is that what Sheila talked about earlier, having that kind of check mark of, let's say, employment information, for example, or affiliation in somebody's in your ORCID record. So that's really adding that kind of validated trust marker in the researchers or the ORCID users' ORCID record. So that's what we're seeing here. And you'll see that progress here as well. So that's a really good way to kind of see how all of this works throughout, when you enable the functionality and then how it is, let's say, from now, for example. So it's a good way to look at the progress. All right. So now that you can kind of think about the metrics and the idea of how all of Researcher Connect works, you're probably kind of thinking, how about affiliation manager? So what's Researcher Connect and what's affiliation manager, right? So that's kind of the question. Should we have one or the other, or should we have both? So really with this is Researcher Connect is different from affiliation manager. So you can kind of think of Researcher Connect as more of a notification workflow, and it really is meant for that. And it does require a vendor integration or a custom integration that is capable of pushing affiliation information to ORCID users, while Affiliation Manager is an integration. So it's an integration that it's built in ORCID. It's a built-in tool within the member portal of ORCID. And that's meant to add affiliation to somebody's ORCID record. And since it's an integration, it requires one member API key to activate that. So that's kind of a key difference there. And then if we look at farther with Researcher Connect, what we're seeing here is that it sends a notification to users. And that notification, the identification of those users is really based on the organizational email domain that the organization provided to ORCID. So the key here is those verified email domains. Meanwhile, Affiliation Manager is the member organizations are actually the ones sending the email to ORCID users. And they're able to send that via, say, a mail merge, for example, or you can actually send it directly from the member portal. And with this, we mentioned with Researcher Connect that it's based on organizational email domains and that the ORCID users need to have that organizational email domain. Affiliation manager, you don't really need to have that organizational email domains, for example. It could be email, any type of emails that you'll be sending affiliations to. Um, One of the things that we always kind of think of is that this particular two functionalities are like Researcher Connect and Affiliation Manager, they do both send some sort of notification or an email in the ORCID inbox itself. And one other thing also is that Researcher Connect is good for reminding users. And again, they're identified via the email domains. So you're reminding ORCID users to connect their ORCID ID with your ORCID integration. So that way they could get that verified affiliation entry in their ORCID record. The affiliation manager is meant to directly send verified affiliation entries to known ORCID users. So basically, what you're doing here is that you are sending an affiliation entry to somebody that you have an email address to already. So it could be like saying, I'm sending an employment affiliation to, let's say, Sheila, for example, or to Kayla. So that's what affiliation is meant to be. Affiliation manager is meant to be. Now, the question is that should you have both? You can certainly to have both of this in your kind of ORCID kind of, I guess, suite of things in your organization, right? Um, Researcher Connect is meant to work with vendor integration and custom integration. So affiliation manager does not, you can't have that notification if you're using affiliation manager. And that's because affiliation manager is already sending those notifications and emails directly to the users. So that's a big difference there. But you can certainly have both. You could use affiliation manager for different purposes. It doesn't need to be employment, for example, but you can send affiliations such as education, qualifications. It could be a membership, service, that sort of thing to ORCID users. So that's a key differences there as well. So with that, you're really the things that you want to think about the requirements and the next steps to enable Researcher Connect. Again, the first thing is that you need to have an active integration that is capable of adding or updating affiliations. So these are the different affiliation types in ORCID. Employment especially, that's a really important thing to have, of course. So these are your vendor affiliation integrations. So like for vendor systems, for example, Esploro is able to push employment information. I believe Symplectic Elements is able to do that. Pure as well is able to push employment information. So those kinds of systems are vendor systems that are able to push employment information to ORCID records. And then you could also have a custom integration, of course, that able to push employment information or other affiliations to the ORCID, to your researcher's ORCID record. And then the next step is that you have to provide ORCID, or basically what you will do is just connect with us at orcidus@lyrasis.org, and you can send us the list of email domains that we will share with ORCID. So that email domains identifies all um, the individuals or ORCID users that should receive the notification. And finally, you will also need an ORCID landing page. What Kayla talked about earlier, the different examples of ORCID landing pages that explains how somebody or the ORCID user should connect their ORCID ID and how they could add the affiliation to their ORCID record. So that's a key part here. So all of this is to really say, if you're not quite sure, you can always email us at orcidus@lyrasis.org to kind of get you started, to have our conversation started when it comes to Researcher Connect. And finally, we just want to share with you resources that you can use. So we have, you've probably seen some of this already, the blog post, the announcement blog post for Researcher Connect, as well as documentation and how all of this works together. We also have the branding guidelines, especially when you are when you are developing your landing pages on how all of those kind of works together. And I've also included the member reporting guide here to give you more details on the metrics and the reports that you will be getting related to your Researcher Connect, for example, or any other kind of information and metrics that's related to your ORCID membership and ORCID integrations. And with that, I think we're going to go ahead and open it up to questions. Sheila?
Okay, so I think I believe everyone should be able to unmute if you want to just ask a question verbally. Also, feel free to type questions into the chat. I see that we do have one question in the chat. We're thinking about getting a research information management system. Is there a list of vendor RIM systems that already have Researcher Connect enabled? So that's a great question. So Researcher Connect is not something that is enabled within a vendor system. It's kind of a separate workflow just to bring attention to the fact that your organization has an ORCID integration available in a vendor system or a custom integration. It's just a way to let your researchers know and point them to where they can go to make that connection. So Researcher Connect is not something that is built into vendor systems or even built into a custom integration. It's really more of a way to let people know that you have that integration available, if that makes sense. Um, so, uh, so hopefully that answers your question. Um, but something to say related to that though is, um, if you are thinking about getting a new RIM system or any other kind of software system at your organization and you want it to be integrated with ORCID, we do have the common systems for ORCID integration Trello board that Paolo just put into the chat. That is a list of all of the various common software systems that or organizations in the US are typically using. And you can look through there. You can also filter it to just show research information management systems or just show repository systems, stuff like that. And you can see in each of those Trello cards for each system whether it has the ability to write affiliations to people's ORCID records. That's going to be the most pertinent information. If you want to use Researcher Connect, you need to already have an API integration turned on at your organization, whether that's through a vendor system or a custom integration. But that integration needs to be already able to write affiliations. So like employment, education, membership, service, invited positions, or distinctions. That's the key requirement. If you have an integration that writes works or funding information or peer review, then Researcher Connect is not going to work with that. Researcher Connect is really just for getting those affiliations. So you need to have an ORCID API integration already working at your organization that writes affiliations to ORCID records. And then we can work with you to get Researcher Connect set up for your organization. Hopefully that makes sense. But let us know if there are more questions. And while everyone is thinking of more questions, because Researcher Connect is specifically focused on getting more affiliations into ORCID records, it's really going to be the most helpful for organizations that probably employ researchers because it's based on that email domain. So, your researchers would need to have the same email domain as your organization in order to receive that notification. So if you're like a funding organization or some sort of organization that doesn't employ researchers, maybe all of your researchers have different email domains, then Researcher Connect is not going to be the right choice for you. So yeah, keep that in mind. We see another one. We just have to let you know we want Researcher Connect. You won't just turn it on for everyone. That's right. That's right. You do have to contact us to let us know that you want to turn that on. It's not something that will be automatically turned on. One, because we need to confirm the email domain. So some organizations have multiple email domains in some cases, and so we need to confirm that piece with you. And then we also need to make sure that you have a landing page that meets the requirements in terms of having all of the specific information to make sure that the user experience is as easy as possible. So we do need to work with you one-on-one if you would like to turn this on. But personally, I think that if you have an integration or if you're thinking about setting up an integration that writes affiliations, it would be really worth it to turn this on just based on what we've seen, those jumps in numbers. It just brings so much more awareness and visibility. Because, researchers have so much going on. They're not always up to date, even if you're sending out emails or putting notifications in newsletters and stuff like that. This is like sending them directly a notification to their ORCID inbox saying, click on this link to go connect with your organization. And we've already seen really strong numbers with uptake on that so far. Um, let's see. Next question. Is it an affiliation being in the record already that would prevent the person from getting a notification? I may ask our colleague at ORCID to chime in on this answer, Emily.
Yeah, hi.
Okay.
So if they already have a validated affiliation from this integration, then they wouldn't receive a researcher connect information. But if they have an affiliation that was added by themselves or by a different integration, and they haven't connected to the integration that we're turning on Researcher Connect for, then they would receive a notification.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Emily. And another thing to clarify, kind of semi-related, unless it's a person who's already made that connection, like Emily said, anyone who has that email domain will get a notification. And we have heard from some members that, they may be using symplectic elements or something like that, but it's only for faculty, for example. And there may be grad students that have an ORCID ID that has that email domain. If there's no way to really know who is who when these notifications go out. So everybody who has that email domain will get that notification. But that's also why your landing page needs to be very clear about who can use or who can benefit from making that connection. Because if it's an integration that only faculty can use, that needs to be made clear for any grad students that might get the notification and follow that link and realize, oh, wait, I actually can't use this. Or vice versa. You might have an integration that's just for grad students, but I'm not sure if there may be some custom integrations that just write education. I can't think of any off the top of my head. Any other questions or confirmation that this is making sense and it looks like people might be interested. Okay, so a couple more questions coming in here. This is great. Thanks, y'all. So if we used Affiliation Manager to put in a validated employment, they would still get a notification. I believe that's correct. Yes, Emily, I see you shaking your head. That's correct. And then if they followed that notification and made the connection to whatever other integration you have, they would basically just have two affiliations, one from the affiliation manager and one from your other integration. And then that researcher could choose to keep both. They could change the visibility of one or the other. They could delete one or the other. It would then be up to them. Another question, can you have more than one affiliation at the same time? If I'm I feel like there's a few ways to interpret that question. I don't know if you want to unmute and clarify, Maria.
I was wondering, you might have somebody who's here at our institution for a certain period of time, but it's still with his home institution active on both. Maybe that's possible. I mean, can you have
Absolutely.
both? I mean, I don't think more than two, but is it possible to have them both kind of like active at the same time?
Yes, absolutely. There is no limit to the number of affiliations that somebody can have on their ORCID record with overlapping dates. You may have researchers who are actually affiliated with multiple different organizations in different capacities all at the same time. There's no limitation on that. So no worries there. Yeah, you would just want to make sure that the date ranges that you're asserting, for when that person was affiliated with your organization are correct, essentially.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for the question. Okay, and another next question. I'm also thinking about creating a custom integration for our grad school. Okay, so there's no way to contact just grad students, not through Researcher Connect. through Researcher Connect, it can just contact everybody who has that email domain, unless the person already has an affiliation from the integration that you want them to connect with. You could reach out to, like, if you had a list of email addresses for all of your grad students, you could email them separately outside of Researcher Connect, and that would be completely fine. But Researcher Connect is just one way that ORCID has kind of stepped in to just help facilitate that communication with everyone. Okay, oh, and Christina, I see your next comment. If you have an email domain that is specific to grad students, then yes, you could just contact grad students that way. Thank you for that clarification. Next question. We have an integration that asks for read and write permissions, but we only read the ORCID ID into our systems. Does this require a revision to the integration to push information into the records before launching Researcher Connect? Yes, that is correct. So if your integration is just set up to read data or just get people's ORCID IDs, then you're not eligible for Researcher Connect. Your integration does have to be actively able to write data to researchers' ORCID records. It has to be writing affiliations in order to be eligible to use it. These are really great questions. Are there any other questions? And I will take these and we'll put them in the notes and have them have kind of like a Q&A section of the notes so that this is accessible after. So while people are thinking of potentially more questions, I will say that a few months ago, we did identify with ORCID all of the organizations that we know of that have an ORCID integration that is writing data to ORCID records. And basically, Emily here with us from ORCID reached out to our contacts at those organizations. So if you have an integration that is writing affiliations to ORCID, you should have, or someone from your organization should have heard from us about this already. But also we know that there's always, development and new things happening. So I know some of you you don't have an integration that's writing affiliations just yet, but it's on your roadmap. So definitely keep this in mind. And we're here and happy to work with you to get the Researcher Connect set up when the time comes. Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, hopefully this was helpful, but because this is a new functionality or feature that's available, we wanted to just have this opportunity to share it with everyone, get your questions answered. Y'all had some really good questions, so thank you. And yes, as Kayla is saying in the chat, if more questions come up or if you're getting to a point where you want to get into the details to set this up for your organization, please contact us. We would love to hear from you. Okay. Well, I think that we were very efficient with this call. Thanks so much, everyone. Pretty straightforward. We will be sharing the recording, the slides, and the notes shortly once we get all of that organized for you all. So stay tuned for that. Contact us if you need anything. Otherwise, I do just quickly want to say before you go that we have several events coming up. Next week, we've got an ORCID US Community Showcase. The week after that, there's going to be a data site US/Canada use cases call. On May 13th, we're doing a webinar about federal funding policies related to ORCID. You're not going to want to miss that one. Click on the link that I put into the chat, our events page. You can see our calendar with the list of all of the webinars coming up. And if you click on each of those, there's links to register. And then also towards the end of May, on May 20th, we're having a webinar about RAID, Research Activity Identifier, the latest PID in our ecosystem. So as you're heading out, please click on that events link. Make sure you're registered for those events. Even if you can't make them, we will be recording them and sending the recording and materials to everyone who registers. So hopefully we'll see you all again soon next week at the showcase, if not, hopefully sometime soon thereafter. Thanks so much again, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks, y'all.